Listen to the vibes.
The views and opinions of our guests may not necessarily reflect those of the host or the Vibes Broadcast Network. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Listen to the Vibes. And I have here Miss Kristin Chadwick, and I'm very proud to have her on my show. She is a podcast coach, and we're going to learn a little bit about her and have a great conversation. So, Kristin, let's just start off. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, thank you, Kyle, for having me on here. Excited to be here. So I live in Colorado. It's an amazing, beautiful place, if you haven't heard. And I have 4 kiddos, 16-year-old, 13-year-old, and 11-year-old twins. So they keep me on my toes. And when I'm not doing anything of driving or taking to soccer or work or any of those, I get to coach people through the podcasting process. So I do everything from podcast coaching to we run a podcast management company where we edit, we write show notes, we upload, we do social media posts, all of the things that you would do as a podcaster. And so that is a little nugget about me. We'll start there.
So how much does that cost?
Well, it varies. So depending on how much you need in your podcasting journey. So like if you just need somebody to edit, then we have a certain price range, and I can share that with you personally. And then if you need the whole gamut, that's there's every price point on there. I try to hit the people that want to do it themselves, but they just need like a little bit of coaching through the process. And then there's the people that are, maybe they're a full-time entrepreneur coach, and they want to just be hands off. As soon as they hit record, they just want to send it off to us, and we will make it all beautiful and produce it and make it sound amazing, and they don't have to do a thing.
I am the worst at the keywords and tags and stuff. That's what I need help with.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. Well, we can chat.
Yeah, I've tried different websites, and they've got different apps you can use that help you find keywords for it, and that's great and all, but it's not getting me the traffic that I'm looking for. And
yeah.
I don't know, you're familiar with the shorts that are on YouTube now?
Yes.
They're encouraging you to do that more often, so you'll get more traffic. They're trying to compete with TikTok, from what I understand.
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely looking into that kind of thing.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, keywords are so important. SEO is so important. And I don't know much about the YouTube shorts. I really just know through my boys watching it. But yeah, I know it's going to be a huge deal.
Yeah, it's crazy. I've got a friend of mine that he'll just take a simple little clip out of one of his shows, uploads it to shorts, and all of a sudden he's got 33,000 views. He hit 1 million views the other day.
Wow.
And
wow.
He's trying to give me advice, and I just suck at it.
I think most of the time we just need accountability on doing it and that implementation. And that's where, just having somebody who's a coach to come alongside and be like, okay, well, what did you do this week that helped move the needle forward? So, yeah.
Oh yeah. You and I are definitely going to be talking.
Okay.
What got you into all this?
So what started it was 2016. I was going to go back to grad school for counseling. And at the last minute, I just felt like, oh, this is not the right time, or this is just not right. There's something not right. So I called the school, I unenrolled. And then a couple of days later, a good friend of mine called me and he said, hey, Kristin, I'm stepping away from radio. He had a radio show. And he said, I want to start a podcast, a grassroots podcast that's really real, raw, vulnerable for families. And we want you to be our producer. And I was like, what? What is a producer? What? Like, I barely listened to podcasts. It wasn't even a thing at that point. I mean, podcast had started a few years before that, but definitely was not as big as it is now. And so really was thrown into the deep waters because my friend saw something in me that I did not yet see in myself. So he basically was like, I trust you with how you're going to do this. He gave me one book. I think I got another book, like an NPR book called On the Wire or something like that. On the Wire. Yeah. And just did a deep dive of like, okay, how do you produce a great show? How do you find guests? How do you connect people? How do you do all of these things? So basically wrote content and read every marriage and family book you could imagine, and connected with the authors and speakers and connected them to come on the show. And it was such a fun journey, really, to do a lot of behind the scenes. And then he started asking if I wanted to join him on the show to give feedback and have a conversation for the listeners to just kind of hear the back and forth. And I was like, oh, no, I am not. I'm good. And he was like, no, you're going to be great. I'll coach you through it. And so little by little, I sat behind the mic, even though I was scared out of my mind. I mean, just, nervous and what do I say? And now I'm awkward. And then it transformed into his wife and I ended up doing a segment every week on the show as well, and got more and more comfortable behind the mic. But I really struggled with trusting my own voice. I thought it was really annoying. And so it took me a good couple of years, and to hear her and a number of other people say, Kristin, your voice is so soothing. It's so peaceful. And then I actually started to believe it, like, okay, well, I'll just keep going then, even though this is so uncomfortable. And so as I kind of morphed from being just a producer to now I'm behind the mic and a co-host with them. And then we just kept producing amazing shows that were, took us from nothing to within 6 months, we were top 25 consistently for a long time. And we, about 2020 in January, we ended up kind of parting ways as far as they were like, I think we got it now that you've helped launch the podcast. And excuse me. At that point, I was like, okay, well, I guess I'll do my own show because I'm feeling a little brave, but really scared. But there's so much that I learned in my own journey as a podcast producer and just in my own life, and wanted to share that as a podcast. So I hit record in my own studio in January of 2020 and had their blessing. And from that, had a lot of people start to ask me to help produce their show, and continue to have more and more people ask me questions about podcast production and, well, how do you even start a podcast? And what does that look like? Well, what do I know to speak on? And so started putting two and two together, that there's a lot of people that need help in this journey of launching a podcast and growing their podcast. And at the same time, I had started a coaching certification. And so really learned how to be a great coach, which is basically learning how to ask really good questions so that people become more and more aware of their own self and how to bring alignment into their podcast or their life through awareness of themselves and of others. And so that's kind of how it merged together was, well, I'm already in this life coaching school that's actually really beneficial for so many podcasters that are coming and asking me all these questions, and we're helping produce multiple shows. And this is super helpful for them to get clarity and purpose and vision on where they want to take their podcast. So in 2021 is when I really went public and said, hey, I am a podcast management company that helps coach podcasters through this process of launching and growing a podcast. And so that's been my journey as a podcaster.
It's great that you were able to combine both worlds, life coaching and podcasting. You were talking about your voice. It's crazy how when you hear your voice played back, it's not what everybody else hears. I don't know why, but it's just that way.
Mm-hmm.
For the podcaster that is wanting to get into your services, do you do like one-offs? Say like they just want to test the waters and see?
Yes. So I do offer, I have a 30-minute free consultation.
Mhm.
So that is typically for somebody who is wanting to start a podcast. So I just bring them in. I hear where they're at in the dream or vision of what they think they want to do a podcast on, and basically lay out, this is the reality of what it looks like. And then here's our services if you want to have help coming alongside. Then as well, we have podcast coaching one-offs. So I can meet with you. Like I just met this last week with a fellow client who every about 6 months, she'll check in with me and she'll be like, okay, I need just 30 minutes, or I just need 30 minutes this week and 30 minutes next week. And because we were honing in on her 100th episode. And so she needed feedback on what was her tagline going to be. How did she want to set up her 100th episode? Or it could be somebody who is 2 years into it and they're like, I don't know if I I really want to be talking about what I'm talking about anymore. How do I switch gears into a different subject? So it could be podcast coaching on that. I have learned over the years that podcast coaching through those first 6 months is highly valuable because you don't know what you're doing and it's so scary. And to have help and accountability on that implementation so that you don't burn out from the get-go is so important. So having a coach that comes alongside you and says, okay, when are the days that you're going to batch record? Instead of every day is like well, maybe I'll record something Monday through Friday, or I have an interview every day this week. Why don't we do it? You have Monday and Tuesday where you do 3 interviews on Monday, and then one is like your episode, a monologue, and then you're set for the month if you're a one show a week. So I'm a big advocate for batch recording. So yeah, that's a variety of things that people have come to me about coaching and our services as well.
Lord, my dream has been, I just want to do a podcast once a week, and then it got to be, I'd like to do one a day, and then it got to be like 2 or 3 a day. Then sometimes it would be, a couple of days out of this week, and maybe a couple of days out. It's been up and down. Finally, I sat down and said, you know what, I got to do this the right way, because this inconsistency, I'm pretty sure, is why I'm not getting the traffic that I want.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I have it set up to where I can do Monday through Friday.
Okay.
I have one show that I upload a day, but I record several a day.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm, even if I have to skip a day, I still have an episode ready to go.
Yeah.
Now I'm not all over the place.
Yes.
And my recommendation to anyone out there, make sure you love doing this, because if you don't, you will burn out very quickly.
Yes. Yeah. And what I will tell my clients too is, what is something realistically that you can hold yourself to consistently?
Mm-hmm.
So if somebody is wanting to start a podcast and they hear somebody say, let's upload every day, it can be completely overwhelming. So for them, if you say, all right, I want you to commit to a year of 2 times a month that you're going to put out something. And so that they have the space and they have the capacity to do a show that is within their wheelhouse and within their capacity of the current situation. Because we can always commit at a lower capacity. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So like if we set ourselves up with, we're going to jump the gun, like if we've never podcasted before and we say, okay, I'm going to do 3 shows a week, you will burn out because you are not at a place where you know what it feels like to do 3 shows a week. And knowing the energy it takes to go behind the scenes of podcasting, it's a big deal. And so I always encourage my clients to start small, and you can always build up from there.
Definitely. I'm fortunate in a way. I told you before we got started, I have a disease in my spine, and it's, I'm on disability, so I don't have a job. This is my job. So I can commit more time to it, where other people, they have a 9 to 5, and it's going to be a little bit more difficult. I definitely would start out very slow. And it's also amazing how I started out in the paranormal world.
Yeah.
And it was a chance meeting with actor Adrian Paul. You might know him as the Highlander back in the 90s on TV.
Yeah. Okay.
I met him, and I'm like, how do you not ask somebody like this to be on your show?
Right.
But he's not paranormal.
Right.
So it made me really think, do I want to stick to paranormal? Because that can get burnt out pretty quickly. You talk about ghosts, you talk about aliens, you talk about Bigfoot, and it's the same old.
Yeah.
So that started me off on this journey of doing a positivity show. I'd get someone on, like a life coach or an entrepreneur, authors, writers. I have actors, musicians. So it's a wide variety, but each one is able to convey some sort of positivity to my audience. That's a pretty broad category if you think about it. So it's easier for me to get guests. That's allowed me, say, to get sometimes 3, sometimes 4 people a day that I get to record with.
Yeah. And what a great message to hone in on positivity. And you're right, it does open it up to so many different types of people, like coaches, entrepreneurs, speakers. Yeah, you have a wealth of people to choose from and hear their story.
And there's so many people out there that they're looking for something positive in their lives. They need some motivation. I don't think there's enough of that out there. There's some great shows, believe me, some great shows, but I've noticed that they're not getting the traffic that I think they should get as well. So I contribute some of that to maybe we're not doing the right hashtags and search engine optimization. Also, you've got quite a bit of competition, because most of the stuff you see on YouTube, it's going to be controversial stuff. What's going on with the latest celebrity or politician, and so much negativity. I don't know why people are so drawn to it. I'm guilty of it myself.
Yeah.
So do you notice those things with the people that you work with?
So I would say the people that I work with, we get real clear on who your audience is. So a lot of the times it can feel like, as a podcaster, you're like throwing stuff at the wall, hoping it sticks. And so the more clear we are on our purpose of our podcast, our mission, then the more we can hone in. And I always say too, it doesn't matter really ultimately how many listeners you have, especially in just the podcasting. YouTube is like a whole different animal. But with podcasting, if you've ever heard of, I'm blanking on his name, but he's the guy that wrote 1,000 True Fans. Have you heard of this?
I don't think I've heard of that one.
Okay. So basically he breaks it down to, if you can get 1,000 true fans, like people that will follow you no matter what, like you could be talking about paranormal, or you could be talking about positivity or guns. I don't know. Any variety of what you want to talk about. Like your pet grooming business. If you have, not even 1,000, but his point is, if you lock in your loyal listeners and you continue to reach them, you continue to speak to them, then you continue to grow your podcast in that way. And that's really what matters. So if I have clients that have 1 million downloads, and I have clients who have in their hundreds right now because they're growing. The point is on both of those, one is 2.5 years old and one is about 4 months old. And both of those, what matters is that they're really connecting with their audience, and their audience is connecting to them as well. And because ultimately we're all wanting community. And I was just talking about this on another podcast, where we have such a world where we are so interconnected, but we're not actually connected. Mm-hmm. And so if we can connect truly to our audience, our listeners, whether it's through email or, if you're on social media and you notice they're following you or they shared an episode, that you are genuinely reaching out to them and saying, hey, I see you. Thank you so much for listening to my show. Like, what did you find valuable? What can I help you with more? How do I help serve you in a way that is going to continue to show them that you really, truly are grateful that they tune into your show every day. So that's really where my philosophy is how well are you serving the audience that you currently have? And if we shift our mindset to that, then it will grow on a more natural way than trying to reach as many people as we can. Yeah, that's what I'm gonna stick there.
And that's what I'm sticking to.
Yeah, that's good.
Oh, I get you. I think my problem has been with social media is I've been so focused on getting my episodes out there. I haven't stopped to really say thank you. Mm-hmm. That's something I need to do.
Yeah. Well, and like, even, if you have family or friends that listen to the show, or depending on where you are plugged in your community, like in real life, making sure that you're sharing your show on a real one-to-one conversation of like, hey, I didn't know if you knew this, but I have a great podcast if you ever want to listen to it. And then go back and ask them questions of like, were you able to listen to the podcast? What did you love about it? Because people just they really want to be seen and known. And so in the real life situations, like if we're in a networking group, or for me as a mom, I'm constantly at sporting events, and I don't like bringing up the fact that I have a podcast show, just because I'm naturally an introvert type of person. And so it usually will be a friend of mine that's like, did you know she has a podcast? And then that will strike up a conversation, but it opens up a door to saying like, hey, were you able to listen? I would love to hear your feedback. And like, it really means a lot to me that you chose to listen to my podcast. You chose to take an hour or 30 minutes out of your day to listen to what I have to say. That's a big deal.
Oh, definitely. Well, I just ordered some business cards.
Yeah.
And what's cool is I put the QR code on it, so when they get it, they can just scan it and they don't have to go searching for it. 'Cause there are a few that are pretty close to the same name as mine, but it's just not the same. But different things like that. I saw this really cool card that all you got to do is you take it out and you just tap it on their phone and it automatically pops up on their phone.
I have seen that, and that is so cool. Yes.
I want that. Just not sure it's in the budget at the moment.
Yeah, I know. Those are very cool, though. Maybe when it gets a little bit more reasonable.
And that's something that people need to think about when they get into podcasting. You're going to have to set aside a budget for this.
Yeah.
There's editing tools. There's platforms that you can launch your show from, which makes it pretty convenient. But
yes.
It's not out of reason. I use Buzzsprout.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's $24 a month, something like that. You get 12 hours of playtime. And, there's, God, you can sit here and list out probably a million different things that you got to get your equipment. And I mean, there's your time as well. That's valuable. Other people's time. There's trying to get guests on your show. If someone hasn't gotten into it yet, they need to realize there's a lot behind the scenes.
Right.
And so I'm pretty sure you kind of lay that on the line as well, right?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, there's a fine line of, coaching people through hesitancy to start a podcast, and then being doe-eyed of like, well, this is the next best thing. There's a middle ground of like, yes, this is great. Yes, your story matters. It is a great tool for businesses to launch their product, their book, their group, their whatever. And the reality is it does take a lot of energy, whether you're having somebody else edit it, all of the things, and doing all the podcast production, or you're doing it yourself. You have to decide what capacity that you have to give. And there really is you could start a podcast on very little budget. And, it's definitely going to have a quality thing going on. But if you want to start and spend under $100 on equipment, you could absolutely. And then just know that the more that you do it, you're going to want to make yourself sound better. You're going to make sure your quality is good. Your editing is great. And, all of those do cost money, and that is the reality of it. But I also am more often than not coaching people that are hesitant because they feel like they don't have anything to share. And so that is typically my client of, they're on the fence because they're not quite sure if they should do it. And those are some of the best results that I love seeing, because when they hit play and then they hear their episode for the first time and they're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that's me. And those are like the coolest transformations of like, okay, I see it. It's real. It is happening. So yeah, those are fun.
And I've given the advice that, start out with the cheaper equipment, make sure it's what you really want to do instead of going out and spending, $1,000 on a microphone and headphones, that kind of thing. Some people I know have started out just doing it on their phone.
Yep.
Just to see if you like it. Going to about what you said, when people hear themselves, we have YouTube on our television.
Yeah.
And so I was showing my wife one of the episodes. My grandson, he's 2 years old. He comes in and he sees me on the TV. He's like, Papa.
Oh, that's so cute.
But yeah, there is so much behind the scenes that I don't think a lot of people realize, but don't get too intimidated. That's one thing I've always said. Tutorials on YouTube, they help a lot.
Yes, you can learn a lot on YouTube and Google for sure.
I learned how to do editing on YouTube.
Yeah. Yep.
So I do all that myself. And I finally was able to get to a point where I could hire somebody to help me get guests. And I had a kid working for me that was trying to help me with the search engine optimization. And I wasn't too thrilled with the results. I mean, he was getting me 1,000 views and listens, that kind of thing. But I wondered if it wasn't bots.
Yeah, I know. That is tricky to know, like weed out what is bots and what's a real unique download.
Yeah, that can hurt you in the long run. I was getting up to $50 in my earnings for the first 2 weeks or whatever of YouTube. And then all of a sudden it dropped down to $20. So And that's when I was like, I think I need to get rid of this guy.
Yeah. Shoot. Yeah.
um, Also, do you warn people about the what's the word I'm looking for? There's some shysters out there.
Yes. Are you
And
talking about guests?
no, I'm not so much the guests, but
Okay.
the emails from people saying, "Oh, I can get you a million
Oh, yeah.
subscribers and all, and just cost you $5,000 or something like that."
Yes.
Yeah, do you
Yeah.
run across those?
I don't, but I don't really give it too much weight. I mean, I've definitely had the like, I ran across your Instagram and you can double your blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, delete, delete.
Oh yeah.
I mean, you can usually sense those kind of things of like, if it sounds too good to be true, it is. And like I said before, I'm all about authentic growth. And so it's those connections with people. Real connections is what's really going to propel you forward on having them share because you're a real person to them. There's so many influencers out there that are sure they have millions of followers, but is the connection really there? Or it did start there, and that's how they've grown so big because it was such a personal conversation between the two.
What is your advice on those guests? And mind you, they're guests that have asked to be on the show that you have to drag the answers out of them.
Oh,
You
yeah.
ask them a question and 3 words into it, they're done.
Yeah. Well, so lots of grace. I have lots of grace for us introverts. Um, because there's a lot going on internally. I would say really make sure before the show, one tip would be have a list of questions that you want to ask. And um, always ask a question that is more open-ended so they can't say yes or no or uh-huh. And then continuing to say, well, tell me more. Well, how did you feel during that moment? Or I would love to hear a little bit more about blah, blah, blah. So really honing in on your own interview skills and questions. And that is one thing I love about working with coaches is they are phenomenal at asking really good questions. And that would be a good tip. And I did this way back when my first podcast I was the question writer at the beginning, and I would hand them a sheet of paper and I would say, all right, here's broad to narrow, because that's how you do it. As a broadcast, you work your way from wide to narrow. So bigger questions at the beginning, and then you hone in at the end. And so making sure you have a pre-plan of, okay, this is where I want to go. These are questions that I would like to ask. And I actually did a whole episode on how to be a great interviewer on my show. And one of the things that I said in there was ask the question that nobody else is asking, but it's a very simple question, like that nobody else would ask of, um, like if I was interviewing you, I'd say, okay, well, I would love to hear how you got into podcasting. What made you say, yes, I'm going to start a podcast? Because it's very curious of, well, what is it about positivity that you need in your life? And, just like honing in on your guests and their world is going to draw them out even more because they do start to feel safe and comfortable in your interview time.
Okay. Okay, I'm gonna ask you a kind of a personal question here. But what has been what you've considered to be the biggest fail in your journey that you learned from?
That's a good question. My biggest fail. I would say not having systems in place earlier, so that my energy wasn't wasted on like, what am I doing today? So that would be a big one. And I think a lot of it is trusting myself that I do have the tools to conduct an interview, to be a great coach. There was a lot of self-doubt, especially at the beginning, because I was on my own and I didn't have my comfort of my best buddy on my right side. And that was really scary for me. So there was a lot of questioning of like, am I doing this well? And really getting comfortable behind the mic by myself was a big learning curve. And yeah, I would go back and probably coach myself a little bit more before I pressed play, or record, just so that I had the confidence that it took to share the things that I knew were wisdom, because it was so valuable. But I can, if I go back and listen, I could hear my insecurity in my voice of like, oh gosh, I hope this hits somebody. And yeah, so showing up more confident earlier, I think would have been probably my biggest fail, because I think I lost some people because they were like, oh, I don't know, is she like truly believe what she's saying right now? So yeah.
Well, we're all going to lay an egg every once in a while.
Yes.
But you sound like me, where you're a perfectionist, where
Yep.
nothing is good enough, no matter what you do.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, now let's flip it. What's been your biggest triumph?
I think going public with my podcast company and really standing on that is my legacy. So the backstory is my dad actually helped found a big broadcast company, and I grew up going to his office. I mean, I've been in TV studios as a kid, went to all sorts of editing rooms with him, and so that to me is what I'm most proud of, because he passed away in 2015, and then my friend asked me to be the producer in 2016, and so it felt very much like a passing on the baton of what he created, and to realize within me that that's also part of my story, and to be able to pass that on to clients, to my own kids, is something I'm really proud of.
Do you have any other goals outside of this?
Oh man, just continuing to grow. I would love to grow into a bigger media company. I'd love to speak and in more places than just Colorado. And yeah.
And have you been to Estes Park?
Of course.
That's my goal.
Yeah. What is it about Estes Park?
The Stanley Hotel.
Oh, yes, of course. Yes.
Of course. But Colorado is beautiful. I have family there I've never got to meet in my life.
Oh, yeah. Well, you should come out. I mean, Estes Park is beautiful. I have been to the Stanley Hotel. I did not stay there. I'm kind of a weenie when it comes to that kind of stuff. So, yeah, we've gone a few times in the fall, mostly during elk season, which is pretty cool to watch the elk crossing the road downtown, and you're like, wow, they're huge, and they're just walking around downtown like no big deal.
Well, I'm sure you need some time to wind down. What do you like to do outside of podcasting and coaching?
Well, a lot of my world of winding down is, put back on my mom hat and go to soccer and hang with my kids. I love being outside in Colorado, so a lot of hiking, and I have a golden retriever named Banner, and he is my little sidekick. So we'll go lots of exploring here. And then my husband and I, we loved going to little coffee shop shows like concerts, and yeah, that's pretty much our little bubble right now.
I'm gonna use this person as an example, but my daughter has a boss, and he's one of these work all the time, never stop, that kind of thing.
Mhm.
Um, how important would you emphasize to your clients to having that downtime and time with your family and time to yourself?
Yeah, I am a big advocate for rest. So, like I mentioned at the beginning, when we were talking about podcast batching, um, the whole point in that is so that we can be present with our kids. And, and so for me, what that looks like is that I am available as soon as school is done and I can be present. And I really have to be really clear on my boundaries because I love working. I love what I do. I love the whole process of podcast production and the social media and the interaction and Zoom calls and interviews. I love it all. And I have to make sure that I get this time because it is pretty much self-care for myself to find this is how I walk out my calling in my life. And then when I'm with my kids, I want to be fully present. So what that looks like is putting down my phone, making sure that I'm not going to check my emails after work hours. I'm not going to be checking Facebook or Instagram because Lord knows I spend enough time on that during the day. And also having in the back of your mind that like our kids are watching us all the time and they'll call me out on it. Like, hey, mom, you were on your phone. But I'm like, you guys need to get off your phone or off your switch. And they're like, well, you were on your phone. So have built-in accountability. So yeah, I hope that answers your question is more of building in time for downtime because we all need to like unplug. And for me, it looks a certain way. And for you, it's going to look a certain way. For Joe Schmo, it's going to look like something else. For me, it's the weekends. I don't listen to any podcast that has to do with podcasting, coaching, marketing, any type of work conversation. It's all either fiction or, whatever, something else that's not going to do that. Or I don't even listen to any podcasts on the weekend and I just listen to music because I know that feeds my soul and that's my downtime. So, and I can tell pretty quickly when I have not had that downtime time because my brain will be like total sludge. And my kids can tell, my husband can tell, and I can tell. And that's not where I want anybody to be. I want people to have that good, healthy boundaries of how do you want to be present to your life in different situations. We all wear different hats during the day, and that is my goal, is just to be present to where I'm right where my feet are.
Yeah, I can't imagine anybody being on a deathbed and saying, gosh, I wished I had worked more.
Nope. No.
It sounds great now, like you're some super person that you can work all the time. But if you don't spend that time with your family and your kids, before you know it, it's gone.
I know. It does go by so fast.
Yeah.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
But there's that song where guys singing about his son, and his son is growing up, and he's like, oh, I'd like to play with you right now, but I'm busy working. And
Yes.
before you know it, his son's grown up. And then when he's retired and wants to spend time with his son's like, I'm sorry, Dad, I got to keep working. And he's like, yeah, he's grew up just like me.
Yeah.
That stinking song makes me tear up every time I hear it.
I bet. That's a doozy for sure. I know. And it's such a precious short window time that I mean, you're a grandpa, so you see it from a whole different level than what I can see at this point. I mean, when you're in the throes of it, it feels like forever, but it's also the reality of it's not long at all.
I mean, my dad never played ball with me, never came to one of my football games, one of my soccer games. He wasn't even there for my graduation because he was working.
Wow.
And I didn't want to be that way with my kids. And then I found myself working that overtime every chance I got because I wanted to provide for the family. And that's an admirable thing. But dude, that's time you'll never get back. So,
Yeah.
have a good work ethic. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Work hard, do what you can, but your family should be your priority, and time to yourself, because you do kind of need that time to just meditate, whatever.
Yes.
But Kristin, this has been wonderful talking to you, and some great advice. I definitely want to schedule some time to talk to you.
Okay.
So I could use a little bit of help.
Okay. Love to.
And your time is precious, and your time with me is very valued. So thank you.
Oh, thank you so much for having me on the show.
My pleasure. And for all of you out there, if you happen by the channel, this is your first time, thank you for stopping by. I hope you'll come back. Please hit that subscribe button too. If you're a regular, thank you for that support. It's because of you that I get to do this. So until the next one, please take care. Be kind to one another. God bless, and peace.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Listen to the Vibes. You can catch us on Buzzsprout or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts, and on YouTube. Follow us on Facebook at The Vibes Broadcast Network